As Stalker 2 now shifts into the fourth quarter, we still have yet to get release dates for Avowed and Indiana Jones. Xbox may be examining timing there and thinking through where they want things to land, not trying to step on each other's toes. We even saw people sort of discussing on Twitter, like, is it time to maybe kick something to next year? I've always said when the fourth quarter of a year starts to fill up, it gets a little slippery because games are going to start slipping into next year, either for polish or just strategic timing purposes. Now, I'm going to end the previous stream about Soulframe and bring people over with Redirect. And Kirk, thanks so much for being here to discuss this situation with game delays.
Yeah, man, we got an interesting second half of the year shaping up, and it'll be very interesting to see where everything falls. It's like dominoes ready to fall. So we talked about awards last season, and this is definitely going to play into that, when these games are going to come out and what people are going to be playing, because I'm sure we both experienced in the past that when a game comes out can make all the difference. Just look at Titanfall 2 in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and originally, I wanted to, and I've said this, and so I'm still going to say it. I want to make this a part of the show, but we didn't want to just have that be the show. Kirk's like, we got to say more than that. But originally, I was like, I think we just need to run with, I'm saying just delay Stalker 2 into next year. Like, quit doing the little half-measured delays, because in my opinion, in the grand scheme of game development, 6 months is like, okay, that might help you. 6 to 9 months gets you a little bit more polish. But when you're like, yeah, we're going to delay it for 2 more months, I'm like, dude, just take more time. Just stop giving us dates and just say, hey, we're going to aim on, at getting this game out in 2025. If there's a developer I want to afford that grace to, it's these guys. Like, they get, run out of their own country, for crying out loud. And some of them are literally fighting, in the combat. We don't obviously want to get into that, but I can afford them grace to be like, look, man, take as much time as you want. Like, there's no reason to stick to a release date at this point. So, but before we get into thinking about the rest of the year, game delays in general, why they seem to keep happening, what's your thought on what I'm saying here with respect to Stalker 2 specifically?
I mean, I totally agree in the respect of, like, these guys have had very personal impact felt from the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion. They even had to relocate their studio to Prague. So they're feeling a very real impact of that. Who knows if that is actually affecting the game development, but you'd have to assume it's affecting their lives, and they're the ones that are developing the game. So there's going to be some sort of after effects there. I don't know where this decision is coming from. None of us do. Is it Xbox that's moving it back? Is it them that's moving it back? Is it them telling Xbox, hey, we need to move it back? Is it Xbox looking at the end product right now and saying, oh, we need to move it back? Like, we have no idea. What I do know is this game was not in a good place when it was showed off at Gamescom last year. That's 2023. A lot of people walked away from that and said, ooh, this thing needs more time in the oven. But when it showed and people got about a 40-minute slice just from the start of the game, it wasn't like a bespoke type of demo experience. It was just, just boot it up and off you go. Everybody got to play it at Summer Games Fest this past summer, and the overwhelming reports from GameSpot and Games Radar and Pure Xbox, Polygon, were all that, wow, this is very transformative from what we experienced last year at Gamescom, which had us worried. They really had this thing in a good place as far as graphically, as far as the performance and everything. It's been a couple outliers from that as far as like what people have reported their experience was at SGF. But all indications are that this game has had a massive upturn in terms of like where it's at from just a year ago. So I'm hopeful that the 2-month delay is just like, like they maybe could have gotten it out in September, but they're not going to try to, push their luck with that. Maybe Xbox is like really going to give them some time to polish things off, and that 2 months is going to allow them to do that. The other line of thinking is obviously maybe where your head is at, where it's like, they're up against it, and November is the soonest they could possibly get it out. I hope that's not the case. We don't have any evidence of that either way. Like, we just don't know. But hopefully this is just like some extra time for them to polish everything off, make sure everything is very very good working and looking and everything, so this can release and get the credit and acclaim that it deserves. But if it's in a bad spot, then yes, I would very much hope that they would give them more time, especially given the extenuating circumstances that they're having to endure.
You're getting pushback in chat, so I was going to push back too, because I was hearing, that the most recent playthroughs were rough. Now you DM'd me, you said it seems like Luke Stevens might have been an outlier. Like Luke
I did the research.
Yeah, so Kirk's done some research, chat, so I am going to push back to give him an opportunity to kind of defend what he just said, because he did more research than me. I watched that Luke Stevens video, and I was like, good golly, it sounds like this thing needed a delay. It's really rough. Kirk's saying other people had a different response. So, Kirk, what did you find when you kind of looked into these claims that, oh man, this game was rough at its last, outing where people could come and play it?
So I couldn't actually find really anything with people saying that they had a negative experience with it at SGF. Obviously, there's that Luke Stevens video that has gotten a lot of attention, him saying that there was screen tearing and that other people at the event noticed that it wasn't good and that there was a huge graphical downgrade. I tried to research, try to find anything from whether it's reputable coverage outlet or a prominent YouTuber or anything. Really, all I could find that was negative was from Gamescom 2023. And maybe there's some conflation happening there where people are like seeing Luke's video and then they're like, oh, where's this game at? And they go look and everybody says, oh yeah, it's awful. Well, I even made a mistake in my DM to you. I was like, oh, it looks like, yeah, Games Radar is corroborating that. Turns out that was wrong. That was an article from a year ago about them being happy that it was delayed into this year. And then they actually got to see it at SGF, and they said it was transformative. It looked amazing. It looked great from where it had been in 2023 when they were actually very, very concerned about it. So everything that I found from like any sort of media outlet, whether it's GameSpot, Polygon, I know there's a lack of trust from the general gamer population with those outlets. That there's instances where gamers feel like they've been lied to before and they haven't been given good information as far as the coverage of these types of games, especially from more biased outlets like pure Xbox or Xbox Era or something. But the big dogs are saying that this game showed up at SGF in a big way. We don't have any direct inside information as to to be able to corroborate otherwise. It's kind of just a he said she said situation, basically. I mean, these are all secondhand sources, so I can't really speak to it. All I can go off of is that the big coverage outlets are saying that there's been a drastic improvement between the build that they saw last year and the build that they saw this year. I'm just going to take that at face value. Now, that doesn't mean the game's ready to ship. We have no idea. This is the first 40 minutes of the game they saw. Maybe the last couple hours are not put together and finished at all at this point. We have no idea. But just on the premise of like, could they use more time based on the circumstances that they're going through? I'm sure they could, absolutely. I hope that they have a lot of autonomy in when they're going to release. At the same time, I don't think that they should have to hold that release back into next year if they don't want to. If they're ready to ship it, they're ready to ship it. I just hope that they're getting the time they need. Apparently, all indications are that there's been some massive improvements. So I'm choosing to be optimistic about that. I always advocate, don't pre-order. If you have Game Pass, you get to try this out just with that subscription. So that's great. But definitely wait for reviews if you would have to drop some money on this to be able to play it. Like, there's no reason to be putting blind faith and trust into something when your money is involved, when you could just wait and see how it looks upon release. So definitely people should do that. But we're getting positive indications here from the media coverage that came out of SGF.
Well, I hope that that's the case, because like I don't have a reason to believe one outlet over another. But when I look at these trailers, I see all of the hallmarks of a game that's going to have a hard time with running well. Not that the game is bad, but I see a heavy emphasis on lighting and shadows and wanting it to look very, very realistic. And I know with respect to the reflections, the lighting, and the shadows, I've even done some analysis of early trailers to now and felt like lighting specifically has gone down a tad, which I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think one of the earliest trailers, I thought the lighting looked unbelievable. I was like, there's just no way. We've got to be looking at souped up gameplay on a PC. We know that these consoles, as much ray tracing as they can dole out, it just isn't going to quite look as good as sometimes these trailers look. So when Luke Stevens said what he said, I was like, well, that shoe kind of fits in my mind, because it does look like the kind of game that's going to come out and going to have those rough edges on performance. Now, gameplay or the story or the world could all be great, but optimization is not always, in the best state with a lot of the games coming out recently, because especially if they build an Unreal 5, not this game in particular, but a lot of games that are trying to build an Unreal 5, or they're trying to harness a lot of these new, lighting and graphical fidelity features to make the game look cool, you end up losing a ton of optimization. So I hope you're right, because when I heard what Luke Stevens said, and then they announced another delay, I was like, dude, stop. Just totally pump the brakes entirely and just kick the game to next year. That's better than trying to push it out if it's not ready. There's also a limited time exclusivity deal here. Do you think that's playing a role at all? Like, if it needs to come out in order for it to actually retain some level of exclusivity? Because I thought it was 6 months exclusive. Now I'm seeing in chat, Paul was saying 3 months exclusive. Why is it? Do you think that's potentially playing a role here? I don't think Xbox is calling the shots, by the way. I think the developer is encountering difficulty, and I think that that's fine. I think that's going to be any type of a game like this, especially when you have to relocate while developing. But I don't know. I wonder if exclusivity is playing a role. Like, Xbox is like, look, you got to have this out at least this year so that we can retain some of the exclusivity deal.
Yeah, I'm not privy to what the specifics regarding exclusivity on this game is. I'm not sure that the media like IGN and the like are either. They may be. I'm just not aware. And I'm not aware of what the exclusivity terms are, or if people know that. I will say, like, you're totally right. The optics of these repeated delays are not great. Like, if we were just looking at that like in a vacuum, it's not inspiring of confidence, shall we say, that they're having to repeatedly delay this game. We could be hopeful that this last one is just, to make absolutely sure that everything's ready to go. But then it's toward the end of the year. I feel like we would feel a little bit different about this if this was like a February release that got delayed into June or July or something like that. Then the fact that it's being delayed 2 months and it's kind of being kept inside of this year, that's a little more concerning, where it's like, okay, do they have like some fiscal year or calendar year type of restrictions? Do they really need to get this out there and reap some type of product or revenue off, profit or revenue off of it before the year ends? Is there some sort of thing to do with the calendar year where they have to get this out in this particular quarter? It sort of looks more that way because it's being pushed right up against the end of the year, as opposed to just like, hey, we wanted 2 more months, like at some random time of the year that isn't the end. So I'll admit, like, the optics of that don't look good. I also totally want to couch what I said about the media reception to the SGF gameplay demo being a lot better, and them actually comparing it favorably to the Gamescom demo. That Luke Stevens could be the most astute coverage person in regard to this game. Like, that could just be totally it. He could be the most perceptive, the most evaluative person when it comes to assessing this gameplay, and he could be the one that that gamers can rely upon here, as far as like giving you the most raw and very perceptive reaction to the game. And maybe the game media coverage outlets are more so just kind of missing the trees for the forest or something. I'm not really sure how to word that, but they're kind of just looking at the pretty visuals and what have you. And Luke is actually assessing the granular gameplay and saying, hey, like there's some issues here, like for the people that are going to go hands on with this day one. That's totally possible. The fact is we don't know. We weren't there at SGF. Unfortunately, that would have been nice. But yeah, like we kind of have to rely on what different people are saying secondhand. In that regard, yeah, it's just like we can't ignore the optics of it. We can't ignore the fact this has been delayed, 2, 3, if not more times. I think this project was like actually canceled at one point. Then it was, reinvigorated. It was brought back to life. So like this game has been through a lot of trials and tribulations. The idea of a sequel happening to the original Stalker games has been an idea that has been alive and then not alive for a while now. I think over a decade. So like this game is a long time coming. I don't think anybody would be upset about having to wait any longer for it, especially given the extenuating circumstances with the war in Ukraine. All I have to say is all the reports from the main media outlets from SGF were very positive. They compared it very favorably to the build that they had been able to look at and play a year prior. And I just hope that if it comes out in November, it's ready to go. Like, I hope that when it releases, it's ready to go. If November is when they think it's ready, I hope they're right. That's all I have to say. I hope that they're right, and I hope that they had enough time to get it to where it needs to be for release.
Well, let's say that happens. Let's say it comes out. I hope nothing but the best for these guys, and I hope the game is stellar and highly recognized with its new release date. I believe they're going to be out of contention. Isn't it November 20th now? Yeah, it's been pushed to November 20th. So it's going to be outside the window of the Game Awards this year. Not that that's a
Is that true? I thought the Game Awards cutoff was like December. Is it really in November now?
It's always been. It's been about halfway through November, and then they spend the weeks in between then and the event going through the jury process. So November 15th has commonly been, about halfway through November has commonly been the cutoff date. So Stalker 2 now probably
November 13th. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're falling outside that window. Now that's obviously not a huge deal.
That's dumb, by the way. That's stupid. If you're going to have a show called the Game Awards and it's like for a particular year, and if anything basically released in the holiday season isn't allowed to compete, that's stupid.
Well, it's allowed to compete. It would just compete in the next year.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen. Like, we have a lot of precedent for those games just not getting acknowledged. A Jedi Fallen Order is a great example. So, yeah, it's stupid that they do that way. All of November should definitely count, especially because the show is in January, isn't it?
No, the show is
Am I wrong about that?
The show is usually about halfway through December. So I think it's a logistical thing. I mean, I can understand looking at that and saying, well, that's kind of stupid. Games that come out in November aren't in contention. But he has to allow, they have to allow for there to be a, time for people to vote and submit everything. It's it's a pretty elaborate process. So
why do they hold the show on December 7th for the game? I mean, they could just do it on January 7th. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, there's business reasons, I'm sure. There's marketing reasons, right? January, everything falls off. He can do it in December, probably rake in a bunch of good marketing money from companies trying to, spend their end-of-the-year marketing budgets on that holiday push. So there's all those elements going into a big production like that. But I will say, it's going to fall outside of the Game Award contention period, which, that is a bit of a bummer because I do see some elements in this getting praise, from an art direction perspective. Even some of the way that the characters look, I think is really impressive. But what about the other games now? I really have to ask the question. We don't have release dates for Avowed. We don't have release dates for Indiana Jones. I saw some pretty big Xbox fans on Twitter bringing this up. They were like, man, what's going on? We're now going into August and we don't have any dates. Now, I don't know if they're going to wait for the next big event.
We have one, November 20th.
Well, yeah, we have Stalkers, but does that pose a potential threat to where they wanted to have Avowed or Indiana Jones land?
Because the leaked date for Avowed was November 12th, right?
Yes.
So those are really brushing up against each other, and you would have to assume the Game Pass audience is going to be interested in both of those. So that's 8 days with Avowed then, potentially before Stalker 2 comes out. So either people are going to love Avowed and they're not going to want to put it down and for Stalker 2, or they're going to move on and Avowed is going to be left in the dust. I would hope that this would mean that maybe Avowed is also getting delayed and it's getting pushed back more so that those two don't brush up against each other and compete with each other for Xbox. We had a show about Avowed where I said I hope it gets delayed. I'm more concerned about that game than I am Stalker 2, except for the optics and the delays and the the extenuating circumstances, that is kind of concerning with Stalker 2. Avowed, I can just look at the game and be like, oh, delay this, dude. Like, please. Like, push this back 6 months if you need to. So yeah, I think that would be advantageous for them to I mean, we've waited. I made a joke in the pre-show, but we've waited like what 8 years or whatever for the Xbox train to finally start leaving the station. As far as all these games that have been coming down the line since forever with what are now in-house developers, it's not going to bother me if we don't have 3, technically 4, with Call of Duty coming out in like a span of 2 or 3 months. Absolutely, I'd be okay with them spreading them out more. It's better for me as a gamer. As somebody who has Game Pass, just being like, here they all are in the same 2-month period. I mean, that doesn't help me. Like, I can't play all of them in that finite period. If anybody has any sort of life, kids, job, whatever, I don't have the kids, but I can't imagine, as busy as I am already, like, you really only have so much time. And so I don't think anybody's going to be super pressed if either of these gets delayed out of 2024. I think it would be in Xbox's best interest to do that, and it sort of spreads out the kind of perception of the offering of Game Pass, right? Like if you're hitting a cadence of every 2 months, here's another blockbuster, here's another blockbuster. If you just cram them all into September through November, I mean, yeah, that's a good offering at one period in time, but it's not really selling the value proposition of having a Game Pass subscription. Right, the point of that being on a month-to-month, year-to-year type of basis. It's just like, well, yeah, I really enjoyed having Game Pass for those 3 months. Now I can go cancel because all the games already came out and I played them all. It just doesn't seem like a great strategy to me. So I hope that they can pivot on that in some way.
Well, we know their goal is to do one big game per quarter at quality, because I think that goes to what you're saying, the idea that having Game Pass, you're going to be less likely to cancel if once a quarter you're going to get a really big first-party title, and then in between you're getting the smaller titles, the third-party titles, the indies, and the like. And that really creates a subservice that's hard to put down. And I tend to agree with you that if like everything lands within 5 weeks of each other, I don't think that's ideal for Xbox from their own internal perspective of, we don't want to, they're not going to want to do that. They're not going to want to say, yeah, let's just slam them all so that if they impact Game Pass, they're impacting the exact same month. You'd want them somewhat spread out, because what that does is that creates this idea that there's always something big coming, instead of almost stepping on each other's toes. And I don't think it devalues it, but it definitely makes it to where it's like, well, wait a minute, I can sub to this for a month, get all these games, try to blitz them, and then cancel. Like, you definitely want it to feel like there's this steady rhythm, because right now, from a first-party perspective, they have Hellblade 2 that has hit. Now, PlayStation has similarly been very light.
Did it hit?
Well, it hit Game Pass.
Yeah, it exists. It came out.
PlayStation has very similarly had a very light presence of first-party, but they've brought a bunch of third-party exclusives to market that have done very well. Helldivers is topped sales charts. Stellar Blade topped sales charts. So there's been more of a consistent, and then Rebirth did well as well, and has gotten a ton of great reviews. Is likely the contender for Game of the Year. So you have to ask the question. It's like, is the priority of Game Pass going to have any kind of an effect on where Avowed? Indiana Jones was rumored for December. So to me, it's like, okay, if Avowed gets bumped to December, then does that bump Indy, right? Because I felt like Indy kind of came out of nowhere. It was like, oh, wow, really? I was suspicious that it was going to get delayed as well, just because it was like, we haven't really seen it or heard anything. And then we did start to see, some of it. It's been kind of inconsistent. As you yourself pointed out, you thought this game looked stellar in its first outing, and then its most recent outing with Indiana Jones, you thought it didn't look quite as good. And, from my perspective, I don't know if either of these games have release dates right now. I don't know if they're waiting to see what other companies are doing, or maybe they were waiting on Stalker. I mean, maybe they were literally saying, listen, until we get a locked-in date from Stalker 2, we don't want to trot our own dates out.
Yeah. I honestly, I would be, what I would predict at this point is if we think Indie is December, I think they hit that. I think that's a great Christmas game. Absolutely. It's a well-known IP. Like parents are going to get it for their kids. They're going to be like, yo, you don't, you about to find out about Indiana Jones, man. Like, this is my childhood, or like whatever the situation is. Like, big IP games do well around the holidays. We saw that with Jedi Fallen Order. So I think that's a slam dunk for them to get that out around Christmas time. It just makes sense as a gift type of game, and people just buy games around the holiday time. Like, they just have some extra money or like whatever it is. They're in the spirit. They want to treat themselves. It's a big time for the games industry around the holidays, from Black Friday all the way through Christmas. I think that stays where it is. I would expect either Stalker 2 to get delayed again out of November, presumably into next year sometime, or I would expect Avowed to move out of like Stalker's way, essentially, because we already both said it would be great. At least I said that it would be great if that game got delayed, and I'd be very happy about that if that got delayed out of the year, so that these two games weren't both coming out in November. I can't see them both coming out in November, except for the fact that Xbox makes weird and questionable decisions, and that would be a questionable decision to have these come out within a week of each other. So it could totally happen on that basis. But I would love to see one of these games get delayed. I don't really care which one. It should be the right one. It should be the one that needs more time or could stand to benefit more from more time. But I think one of these should definitely get delayed. I do just want to say, despite the optics being bad as far as the state of the game of Stalker 2 with all these delays, I think that this last delay was chef kiss prudent for them to do, because this game was going to release one day before Astrobot Rescue Mission and 4 days before Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, about a week before Text Drive Unlimited. That's not really the same crowd per se, but like, it's a much more packed time. Notria is coming out for those like hardcore gamers that want a challenge, want difficulty. They might move on, and by that point, not that you necessarily wouldn't be able to beat Stalker 2 in about 2 weeks, but like, that September is a crowded month, and so them putting it towards the end of September. Obviously, I know Assassin's Creed Shadows is coming out during that month as well, but it's literally the last game that we have an official release date for this calendar year right now. Obviously, we'll get more release dates as we continue onward through the year, but it's on the calendar of known dates right now. Stalker 2 is the last one that we have, the latest one that we have. So I think that it was very brilliant for them to make that move out of a crowded month in September, maybe get a little more attention later in the year. But I think that with Avowed coming out basically only 2 weeks prior, sorry. No, wait. It is a week. It's a week. It's a week and 2 days, I think. It's about 9 or 10 days. So with Avowed prospectively coming out about 9 or 10 days prior, I just don't think that works well synergistically. So I think it would make the most sense for them to delay one of these out. I'm just thinking, why would they delay Stalker 2 just to delay it again? Like, the optics of that are so bad. They must have realized, like, when they had to push the delay button, that this was going to be the date that it ships. So I assume that they're locked in to this November 20th. As we spoke about earlier, I just hope that that's not, a folly in terms of them trying to push it out too early. I hope that they're being smart about that release date. They're not trying to rush it out. But I would assume with them having delayed it, they had an opportunity to pick any date that they want to delay to. I assume that the 20th they're locked into now. So I'm kind of hoping now that with this game coming out in late November and Indy coming out in December, and with Avowed moving up, not really being an option, I would think, I'm hoping that Avowed gets pushed out of the year into a February or March release date. I think that would be good for all three of these games, so long as Stalker 2 is ready to release in November.
Yeah, I look at it a handful of ways, since they have not announced release dates for Avowed and Indiana Jones. That gives them a little bit of freedom to move things around and not upset anybody. It's not like they said, oh, Avowed's coming on this date and Indy's coming on this date, and now they have to make adjustments because of because of the situation with Stalker 2. But since Stalker 2 is the one that's consistently had to kind of come out and readjust release dates, I would move that one. Like, it'd be far better to get Avowed out this year, get Indiana Jones out this year, and if Stalker 2 is the one that kind of has to keep moving those goalposts, I think people would just accept that. I think if you come out and you say Avowed or Indiana Jones aren't making it this year, I think that's way worse than just punting one more time on Stalker. Because to me, Stalker's already had a handful of delays. What's the harm in one more? Indy and Avowed, it's like these are your two big games to end the year with. I don't know. I wouldn't touch either of these if they can avoid it. I'd leave both of these two on schedule if possible.
I don't disagree, but I think you're playing a little bit of Monday morning quarterback here. If you're familiar with that phrase, it's just like some armchair post-action analysis. They've already delayed it to the 20th. I think that you're absolutely right. If they're in the situation room and they're like, what do? We got these 3 games. Stalker's not going to be ready in September. Which one? How do we reshuffle this? I think you're absolutely right. Your advice is better than what they did. They should have pushed Stalker back out of 2025, had Avowed release when it's going to release in November, presumably, and had Indy release when it's going to release in December, presumably. They made the decision to delay this game to the 20th and no later of November. So I think that they're locked into that. They can't delay it again. I mean, they should if the game's not going to be ready. But if it's not going to be ready, then they made the wrong decision last week, when they delayed it to when they chose the 20th. So I don't know why they chose the 20th, but they did. So I don't think that they can delay it again. That's just a terrible look at that point. So I think it makes sense for Avowed to be the one that gets kicked out.
Just to be clear, I wasn't trying to Monday morning quarterback and say what they should have done. What I was saying is if they're all in the room now.
I know. I'm saying that's what I'm saying. To make that analysis now, like you weren't trying to say, oh, they should have done something different. You're saying they should do this. I'm saying they can't. Like now that, unless they have to, like now that you have picked the 20th of November, delaying it again is just like, I mean, you're just in like, what's the word? Worst case scenario now. It's a code red, basically. If you have to delay it that many times, I mean, it'll be a meme. It'll be Skull and Bones level of media press coverage at that point of this game getting delayed like 5 times. So like they must be locked in. Like they must know and be comfortable with the 20th. Whether that's a Redfall type of situation, they're just like, just get it out there, or they actually think that this game's going to be feature complete and ready to go on release. And it's not going to be a buggy mess. I have to assume with them picking the 20th and choosing to delay this game last week, that's when the game's going to come out. So at that point, I'm advocating for Avowed to get pushed back. What we've actually seen of Avowed actually looks a lot more concerning to me than what we've seen of Stalker 2. That's just what we've seen. I don't know if behind closed doors Stalker 2 actually looks a lot worse than Avowed, but what we've been able to see of these games, the footage that we're seeing behind us right now of Stalker 2 looks fantastic. Reminds me a lot of Metro Exodus. That game also, Metro Exodus, had a substantial downgrade from the footage that they originally showed, but it's still an excellent game. I would hope and expect Stalker 2 to be kind of a similar situation to that, as far as like, it's not graphically looking quite as good as like what they've shown us, but like performance-wise and everything, it's more than functional. It's, the story and everything, the atmosphere, it's delivering in spades. Hopefully that's where we end up on the 20th. But I do think that this game is going to ship on the 20th, because I can't see them delaying it last week and then delaying it again. So at that point, I would hope that for Xbox sake, for Avowed's sake, that they push Avowed out of 2024 into 2025. I don't think that Avowed is like the big blockbuster hit they've got to have come out this year for whatever reason. I think that they can take their time with that game. I like that game much better in a February-March window when people are looking for something to play. So that's what I'm advocating for. But I understand what you're saying. Like, it makes the most sense given the way things are seeming to kind of fall, where the chips are going to fall, for Stalker 2 to be the one that wouldn't release this year. But like, they already pushed the button. Like, that's what I mean by Monday morning quarterback, is like, your analysis is sound. They've chosen to go in a different direction for whatever reason. So we kind of just have to accept now, I think, that Stalker 2 is coming out November 20th. And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, what do we do to kind of coincide with that, or to pair well with that? I think Avowed moving towards spring would be early spring. No, sorry. The first quarter is what I mean to say. The first quarter of 2025 would be a good move, given that fact that they are now apparently going to release Stalker 2 on November 20th.
Yeah, I don't know who gets to call that shot. Like if the Stalker 2 devs are getting to call that shot, if that's going to have this impact on what Xbox decides to do. I don't think Avowed's like a big blockbuster. I was just looking at the optics of like, I think Indiana Jones is the bigger title, right? It's more recognizable and more.
I think that one's
well-known.
got to come out this year. I do. I think like if like for Xbox to not be laughed at, that's got to come out. And it's got to be like mid to high 80s. It really does. Like there's no way around that. If they were like, oh, it's delayed by another year, like it's like what game hasn't been then at that point? Like you got Halo, you got pretty much everything. I guess Starfield wasn't delayed, right? But I mean that was middling as far as reception. So
Starfield was delayed twice.
Okay. Then that's just me not being knowledgeable. My apologies. Yeah, like at some point, Xbox just got to be like, this is the game, and this is when the game's coming out, and it hits, and it's good. I mean, we're just waiting on that still. So I'm hoping that's indie, but yeah, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, and I think indie, like you said, I think it's a good holiday release, and we had that I thought that was really weird where they had that interview and the Avowed release date got like leaked, but then they edited it out of the article. My theory right now would be that perhaps they just could not get a concrete date, or whoever they were sending to the Stalker 2 guys, it's very possible that they were saying, look, this thing looks shaky. This does not look like it's going to come out on time. It's not going to it didn't hit its first quarter. This is supposed to be Xbox's first quarter game, and now it's landing in fourth quarter. It was going to land in third. And so it was supposed to kick off the year and then go right into Hellblade 2. And if that would have happened, I actually think we would have gotten release dates for Avowed and Indie. The more I look at this, the more I think that Stalker 2 kind of disrupted the flow of like, okay, you were supposed to be our first quarter. Now you're going to land third. All right, we got to shuffle some things now. That means we're going to have Avowed and Indie both landing fourth, while now Stalker 2 just joined them in the fourth. So it's like, if maybe that's one of the reasons why we just have not gotten release dates on these games. Because I think you observed, and many other people have observed in the past, it's like, well, they don't want to give you release dates. They want to have this illusion of games are always coming, but if they give you dates, that could affect people maintaining their subscription. Yeah. Like, maybe you're more likely to maintain your subscription to Game Pass, like with this mystery of, well, we don't know when these games are coming.
I've had Game Pass for like 4 years because of Fable. Like they got me bad. Like, with them announcing this console, they were like, Fable, coming soon, or not soon, but like, Playground Games is developing it. And like that game will come out on the, PS6. Yeah, they debated us all for years now. I want to go ahead. Bubble Tea in the chat is like going off saying like we need to stop normalizing delays. I don't understand why you guys are looking at delays like a good thing. Stop delaying games. I can tell you exactly why. Cyberpunk 2077, like that is the poster child for why some games should get delayed. That game is in such a better place just a year on from its initial release date, and also with the release of Phantom Liberty. Imagine if Halo Infinite didn't get delayed. Hell, that game probably could have used another year in the oven. I think gamers want games that are feature complete. Like when you're starting to ask gamers to cough up some cash to play a game, they want a game that is in a good state when they get it. They don't want an Assassin's Creed Unity or a Cyberpunk type of situation. So when you talk about why are people talking about delays like they're a good thing, it's because of the concept that hopefully that means that when I'm getting ready to spend my $70, which is not cheap, that the game's ready to go and it's in a good state. Like that's what we want. So just because they said at one point that the game's going to come out at this time, and now they're like, we're not going to make that. Like we're not going to have a product that's ready for you that is worth your entry price, your purchasing with $70 or whatever it is by that time. That's just the right thing to do. Like, that's just like not being a seedy corporation that's like, well, whatever. We already got their money. Just ship it. Absolutely. That's why people are in support of that. These games should not be releasing until they're ready, until they're worth the money, until they have all the features that are advertised. And so, yeah, I think people have come to view delays as a good thing in that regard, because we want these devs to have all the time they need so they're not getting pressured into a situation where the game comes out too early, it's buggy, it's unfinished, and then people have a terrible reception of the game, which otherwise, if it had just come out a year later, people might have thought was, a hallmark worthy of acclaim. It's it's a great game. It's one of the best of the year or whatever. But you get in a situation with like an Assassin's Creed Unity or something where it's actually a pretty fantastic game in retrospect, but it came out, it was super buggy. You could see his like teeth through his, it was just his eyeballs and his mouth or whatever. Everybody's seen that picture at this point. And the state that like Cyberpunk released in, especially on last gen consoles, was horrific. And like people are still going to always remember that. Like I guarantee you there's people that have not touched Cyberpunk since then, that aren't aware of Phantom Liberty, that aren't aware of like all the major strides that game has taken to where it's like actually winning ongoing game of the year, and maybe could have been a game of the year contender if it had released a year later. They're just always going to remember the fiasco of when that game came out. So like that's why people perceive delays as a good thing. People just want the game to release in a state where they're getting their money's worth. They're not getting scammed, they're not getting swindled because the game wasn't ready to come out. And so like, yeah, absolutely, I support delays. If all three of these games need to be delayed in order for that to be the case, and nobody's getting a game that's buggy and incomplete that they paid good money for, that they should do that. They should delay all three of the games they need to. And I think most gamers agree with that. There's no reason to rush these types of things.
Well, and I've said this a lot lately, and I get a lot of pushback on this, but I've continued to say that I think marketing for video games is changing, and it needs to change, because I don't want to hear about your game. I don't want to see gameplay. Don't give me a release date until you're within 12 to 18 months, because then I'm more confident that I'm going to get that game at that time. We keep showing games way too early, right? We saw State of Decay 3 5 years ago. We saw Hellblade 2 4 or 5 years before it came out. And all it does is it makes that anticipation period, almost a miserable experience as you get pieces and parts and simulated gameplay, and then the gameplay degrades over time. Like we just looked at that with games recently with Star Wars Outlaws has had an incredibly short marketing window, and even it's going through what is visibly a degraded period of like, hey, this does not look like what it looked like when you guys first showed it. So if I'm choosing between, just shove the game out, it's not ready, and well, no, delay it to make it better, I'm choosing the lesser of two evils, right? We're not sitting here saying, hey, just delay every game that you feel like it, right? Just keep delaying games. I think. I mean, I'm not advocating for that. Let me finish my thought. Let me finish my thought. Let me finish my thought. Please let me finish my thought.
Yeah, go.
I'm not advocating for that either. I'm not advocating for just delay every game. What I'm advocating for is shorten your marketing windows so you don't have to delay. So that if there's a delay happening, we are confident that it's needed. It's like something happened, they encountered a problem, or it needs to be polished. I think if we get shorter marketing windows, we should see less delays.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I just don't understand like the mentality of like the games have to come out. I need more games to play. I mean, I haven't finished Banishers. I haven't finished Rise of the Ronin. I haven't played Final Fantasy Rebirth. I haven't played Dragon's Dogma 2. Like, I don't know who these people are that have all the time in the world to play every game that comes out. I mean, First Descendant, that's like a 80, 100-hour game, that I'm like however many hours into that journey now between the beta period and the amount of time I played it since release. Like, I just don't understand like this rabid appetite for like, we need more games and more games and more. Like, there's still games from last year. I haven't touched Baldur's Gate 3 yet. So I mean, like, I don't know if I'm like in the minority here, but probably to go back to last year is a bit like a perversion of like the argument that I'm trying to make. Just in this year alone, we've had so many quality game experiences to come out between Like a Dragon and Stellar Blade. I mean, like, Stellar Blade is a game that I got to finish, but like, because I finished that, there were other games that I haven't played yet that released this year. So like, I don't care. You can always push games back as far as I'm concerned. There are so many games that come out in a given year. There are so many indies that are good, like that I haven't played Animal Well this year. There's so many double A games and indie games now, because of the resources that are available to smaller dev teams, that are quality games that come out every single year. Not to mention the big sellers, the blockbuster games that come out every single year. I mean, we are just overwhelmed with the amount of games that come out, the amount of quality game experiences that can be had. I think quality in gaming is going up in general, like across the board, with the amount of games and the amount that aren't like bad, that are worth playing, that are a good experience. I think that that's just going up. V Rising was great. Thank you, Dave Langer. I got the opportunity to play that at the expense of not playing other games. So like I just, there's always games in a given year that I don't have time to play that I would very much like to play. So absolutely, I'm never against games getting delayed. I just, it doesn't affect me. Like, I'll get to play it when it comes out. I don't understand this, like, give it to me now, like, kind of mentality. I'm not going to cast any, like, bad aspersions on it beyond that. But I just, I don't think there's anything bad about development teams taking the development time that they need, publishers pushing back games into, later quarters. I don't have any issue with that, because, like, I would be much more concerned about the opposite, about, we need this to release now because we need money, we need our metrics to line up for this particular quarter or this fiscal year or whatever. That's when you get problematic stuff happening. I have no issues with games getting pushed back. They can always refund me my pre-order money, and I shouldn't have pre-ordered it anyway, because pre-orders are never smart, basically. So I'm totally in favor of games getting all the time they need, and I'll just play the other stuff that I haven't gotten around to this year.
I do want to take up for the people, though, that are a little annoyed by some of this, because especially if you're a diehard Xbox fan, this was supposed to be your year. And
that's fair.
We're going into August, and it's been pretty light for them. Now, they could obviously say, oh no, Game Pass has had a lot of great games, third-party indies and double A's, and that's fine. But I also think it's probably getting a little unnerving that you keep getting shown a bunch of games that don't show up on time, right? They did that the one year. They're like, hey, here's all these games coming in the next 12 months, and over half of them didn't make it. And I've continued to say Xbox needs to stop speaking out of turn. Stop walking out in your showcase, trotting out a bunch of games, and creating this almost like this atmosphere of expectancy, because I do think it's fair for people to be annoyed. Like, okay, come on, enough is enough. Like, start shipping games. I think you can say both. I think you can say, come on, seriously, while also saying, yeah, I guess delay it instead of shipping crap, like if I have to choose between the two. So I do think it's fair. I'm trying to be a little empathetic to people that might feel like, good Lord, like, is that all that's going to happen now? Is like release dates are basically a joke? They're just a placeholder? I think that's a fair frustration point.
I think there's a larger issue at play with Xbox specifically. I went on a rant about that earlier this year in the early spring, I think. Just like Xbox has been saying for a long time now, the games are coming, like they're coming down the pipeline. We bought all these studios to give you the games, and my rant was about, by the time all these games come out, none of them are even going to be exclusive. Like, you sold me a bill of goods, as you like to say, on getting this console, because you'd bought all these studios and all these games were going to be developed under the Xbox umbrella and published under the Xbox umbrella. And previously that had meant that the games were going to be exclusive. So I thought my investment in this console, the Xbox Series X, was a good investment, because I wanted to partake in all those IP. I wanted Starfield. I wanted the next Elder Scrolls game, whenever the heck that's going to come out. Speaking of games getting pushed back, who knows how long that's going to take to come out. But like, I do think that there's something to be said there, and I definitely empathize with that and have experienced that, like, personally, in that, like, people that invested in an Xbox were hoping that these games are going to come out sooner than, 6-7 years after the release of the console. I mean, we're talking about games that were literally touted when the console was releasing as, like, value proposition and reasons that you should buy the actual console. Fable, Avowed had a trailer that, the game looks very different from now. So, like, that is a problem for sure, what you're talking about. I think that's a larger Xbox issue. I don't think either of us are here to dunk on Xbox in any, like, kind of particularity, but for sure that's been an aspect of their marketing, is that they have touted the fact that they went out, they got all these studios, and there were criticisms during the Xbox One era that they didn't have the games. Now we've got the games, has kind of been their marketing push for a long time now, and they still don't have the games. And so at some point they're going to have the games, but, like, I guess that's kind of where I'm at, where it's like I've already been hoodwinked, so whatever. I mean, it's already been how many years? 4, 5, 4 since the console released, I think. It'll be 4 at the end of this year, I think. Could be 5.
Yeah, no, yeah, 4. 4. It released in 2020.
So that's 4 years of just basically not much, discounting things like Hi-Fi Rush and stuff like that. And those games aren't even exclusive. You can get them on the PlayStation console, and that'll be a problem with all of these, I think. You know, that's a different conversation that we've had in shows past. But yeah, like, it's been 4 years. I can wait another year if I have to. It's whatever.
I also wonder what a role Black Ops 6 is playing, because that's going to be, I think, a monster title this year. I've said I think it's going to be one of the best-selling Call of Duties. I think the record that Starfield holds with, like, the single most Game Pass subscribers in a day, I think Black Ops 6 is going to steal that record. And I wonder if that's also playing a role. Like, are they going to look and say, okay, we've got a Call of Duty. Arguably, it stands to be one of the big, probably not the... No, it'll be the biggest release of the year, I would imagine. And if that's going to happen in October, and now Stalker's happening in November, Indy lands in December, that's a great cadence. That's a really strong finish for Xbox. And I just wonder if what you're saying, like if they just decide to say, let's just bump Avowed to Q1, because the devs have acknowledged with Avowed that they would like to get, you know, and listen to some of the feedback about the combat, and that would give them maybe a little bit more time, because I actually think these guys have the good pieces and parts of a game. When I look at some of the RPG elements they talked about in that deep dive, I'm like, I actually think this game's gonna be good. I don't know if it's gonna be some award winner and some, you know, record-setting game, but I think they have the good pieces and parts. I just want that combat to feel good. I want to be able to play it in third person and have it feel good, because I feel like Xbox has been sort of, and now they are kind of a sleeping giant at some level. Like, what are they going to come out swinging with? Are they going to come out swinging as a publisher? Are they going to come out swinging with timed exclusivity? Like, because like what the CFO said, good, better, first, better, or best. Are they going to start flexing that? Like, you're going to get games first on their platform, or you're going to get things first. Like, you know, Phil Spencer said they don't want to do that with Call of Duty, but I don't know. They might start doing that with some of their other property to really stress that library. And this could be one of their strongest years ever, largely because of Black Ops 6. But that could also be playing a role in why they don't want to put release dates out, because maybe they wanted to see, like, okay, where's Black Ops 6 going to land? Where are pre-orders going to land? How much are we going to want to really push Game Pass with that? So they could be trying to center the marketing around that nice, steady cadence, because they just put MW3, you know, on Game Pass. So they're also starting to kind of leverage the ABK library as well.
Yeah, I think it does have the potential to be a pretty big year for them. So, and I think you're right in echoing what I said earlier, that I don't think Avowed moving outside of that window really affects that. I don't think they have a less impactful year as a result of that. And I really like the idea. I mean, I haven't looked at what the release dates we know for. I don't think we really know anything for January through March. That has been a more crowded window as of late. It was only like 2 or 3 years ago when that was like a time that smaller games or games that wanted to make sure that they weren't releasing in a crowded period would start releasing in that type of February window. And then now it's like, it's just open season basically for games releasing. Like, everybody's kind of followed that lead. So that's now actually kind of a crowded time. But if we were going to have a less crowded time during that February, March type period, Avowed, I think, fits really great during that. That's a game that I would love to play when I can actually sit down and spend time with it. And I would like for them to take more time on it before I spend time in it, because I haven't been super impressed with everything that I've seen. But I love Elder Scrolls, and I really do still believe strongly that this game like has a lot of potential in concept and could be something that can really capture people in terms of like the world and the narrative and the atmosphere, and just kind of that like old-fashioned good RPG, you know, warm and fuzzy feeling that you get when you're playing like Elder Scrolls or even Baldur's Gate or something like that. I think that they can accomplish that. So I would not be at all sad if that got moved out and they had some more time to be able to do that. I wouldn't be sad if Stalker 2 got pushed out. I just think that they probably mean it when they say the 20th, that they're going to, announce this delay and everything.
Right. Well, and the pattern right now too has been that everybody's trying to like dogpile in fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden stuff starts slipping into next year, and then the first quarter gets dominated, right? We've had a couple of years where like April, March gets insane. So, we could be staring down that barrel right now where there's a lot of games that continue to say they're targeting 2024, and like we don't have release dates yet. Not even just on Xbox's side of the fence. So you could start to see more and more games slip. And then, next year gets a little precarious because everybody's going to try to avoid GTA 6. Like nobody's going to want to land in anywhere near that game. The proximity of GTA 6 is going to be absolutely daunting and terrifying. So, I was already just looking at a quick list of games sort of slated for next year. Next year's already got a lot of stuff listed as well that has been announced with just that 2025, no firm release dates. And I love that cadence too of like Xbox could start the year with the developer direct and give us some release dates for their games. This year, that was one of the things that kind of disappointed me about the direct is they didn't give release dates. Like, I think that's a good cadence. It's like, hey, we got a bunch of games coming next year. And you're like, sweet. And then they can kick off the year with the developer direct and give us those release dates. Because at that point, you should be able to, I think. If you're doing the developer direct every January, it should be fairly easy to say, over the course of the next 10 months, we know what our release dates are. And now that their library is so big, I would hope that's an annual tradition we can kind of count on. I like that. I like how we kind of end the year with the Game Awards, kick off the year with with a dev direct, maybe a state of play, and then the summer is kind of when all the showcases happen. So
Another thing about Avowed too is that that leaked release date, the 12th, 3 days before Assassin's Creed Shadows comes out, which they're not in the same genre, but compared to like Valhalla, if it's that type of game, like that's a Witcher 3-esque type of RPG style of game. So like, does that suck away some of the player base of Avowed, especially with it being a bigger property? Potentially. So I would like to see Avowed get moved into next year. Shadows is posing enough of a threat as it is to Stalker 2, but apparently they weren't super concerned about that. Maybe they think it's just not the same audience. But September, October, and November are just packed as is. October being kind of the big month, I think, when a lot of things are coming out. So it's kind of good that Xbox's main big player in October is Call of Duty, because nothing's going to overshadow Call of Duty. That's a big time month with Silent Hill 2 is coming out. Like that may not be the biggest one, but that has the brand name recognition. You got the big Diablo 4 expansion. Metaphor RE Fantasio is a big release from Atlas. The Persona fans are going to jump all over that. Life is Strange is another Game Pass game that's coming out during that time. So again, still crowding the Game Pass catalog a little bit. Not that that's a bad thing. We want a lot of offerings on that platform, on that service. But yeah, I like them kind of bookending October to that degree of like, get something out in November, get something out in December. I think they could have put something out in September, maybe later in the month, but that's crowded too. You've got Inotria, Test Drive Unlimited, Space Marine 2, Astrobot. So it was probably good for them to get out of, especially the week that Astrobot and Space Marine 2 come out. I think it is a good thing for them to move that back. So I think that they have the right mentality and the right strategy going into the latter part of the year. It's just like, how will everything shape up? We're not really sure. Will they kind of bungle the November thing of having two games kind of on top of each other? We're not really sure, but they seem to be leaning in the right direction as far as hitting a good cadence with these.
Do you think the fact that they're now wanting to start to put games on PlayStation, is that playing a factor at all? Because James Rucker said no excuse. He said, we got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Stellar Blade, and Rise of the Ronin. Yeah, but to be fair, those were third-party deals, right? Yeah. So it's like they got a company that they work closely with, whether you want to call it second party or third party. Xbox is in a little bit of a different scenario, that they bought all this property and now they're trying to bring it to market, but they also seem to have competing, internal debates going on where like Microsoft is seemingly, from Satya, pushing for more third-party publishing, like, hey, put the games everywhere. Is that playing a role at all? If some of these games do get delayed, is it because they would prefer them just to release on all platforms instead of hitting Xbox first? Because, like, I actually think it makes sense to put them on Xbox first. Like, that makes more sense to me because that's a great reason to be on Game Pass. That's a great reason to keep saying, hey, play it day one on Game Pass, and then they might get more people to bump up to Ultimate. I don't know. I wonder if they're looking at a title like Indiana Jones especially and thinking, does that launch better third party? Like, sorry, I'm multi-plat. I meant to say.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused by what you're saying. Are you asking me, do I think that they're delaying the games so that they can release them on all platforms day and date?
Well, not necessarily these. Like, are they going to start to internally say, we just had Indiana Jones ship as an exclusive? And are they going to basically analyze the business impact of that and say, going forward, it makes better sense to use a big piece of property like that as a multi-plat release? Like, let's take Blade for an example. Like, are they going to say, going forward, this just doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense to do these big titles multi-plat. Like, what's the dividing line going to be for a title that makes sense to be a timed exclusive that hits Xbox first and a game that's multi-plat? Like, how are they going to make that decision?
I mean, yeah, that's an entirely different conversation that we've been having for the past year now, since we figured out that they were planning on making a lot of their IP not exclusive. Doom will be the first indication of what that's going to look like, right? I think that's releasing day and date on all platforms, and that didn't necessarily have to. They could have totally locked that behind exclusivity or timed exclusivity. I would say with the way that the wind is blowing, I would say the majority of games will probably not be timed exclusive, with there being some timed exclusive games that release in the meantime. I think eventually they're going to kind of desensitize people into the new normal just being that their games come out everywhere, because that makes the most monetary sense for them. Like, the fact of the matter is that Indiana Jones, when it comes out, is going to have the max hype level that it's ever going to have, and that would be when people want to buy it. When they announce that it comes to PlayStation 6 months later, they're not going to make as many sales on PlayStation as they would have during that holiday season. It's going to be the same thing for Starfield. Right. It releasing with like a Shattered Space, like if they do like a complete edition on PlayStation, that might actually help. And also the fact that the game like didn't release to amazing fanfare when it actually came out, like people were like, oh, this isn't quite as good as we thought it was going to be. I still think it would have sold gangbusters on PlayStation. So I think they'll move in that direction. I think eventually exclusives and timed exclusives for Xbox will be kind of a thing of the past. I mean, the fact is that they're playing from a place of not strength, basically. Like PlayStation strategizing from a place of strength. They can afford to make games like Rise of the Ronin and Stellar Blade and others just exclusive, just point blank period, exclusivity deal. It's ours. Final Fantasy Remake Trilogy also, it's ours. They can afford to do that because they're in a position of strength. Xbox needs these games to ship on other platforms so they can make money. It's just the fact of the matter. That's why this is happening. So I would feel like if they refrained from doing that for a time and they tried to do timed exclusivity windows or things like that, they're just kind of like hanging on for dear life, like they don't want to let go. I think it's kind of what that would be. I mean, they've already moved too far in the direction of things not being exclusive. I don't think that's going to help if they're like, oh, it's on Xbox for the first 6 months. I know a lot of people, myself included, that would just be like, all right, I guess I'm going to play it in 6 months and then on PlayStation because that's my console of choice. I don't think they're really moving the needle by keeping that timed exclusivity window.
I think they're going to continue to have exclusives. I'm just going to be very curious what that dividing line looks like. Like you're saying Doom next year, that's going to be multi-plat. Now, a lot of people are like, well, Doom's always been multi-plat. Yeah, but when the Bethesda deal went through, we were told, yeah, this property is exclusive going forward. So that was a bit of a change. So now I'm curious, like, are they going to have some sort of a metric of saying, okay, this game makes more sense to do multi-plat because of its history or because it's Blade, like being Marvel. We know Disney's going to want maximum exposure. We saw that with the Insomniac leaks and how they do the royalties. So it's like, what's that dividing line going to be looking like? What's going to be, sort of prized as it's coming to Xbox first, and then if what you're saying, if that window becomes predictable, do people just start saying, well, I'm happy to wait. I don't think Indiana Jones or Avowed or Stalker has anything to do with PlayStation. It just got me thinking. It's like, well, wait a minute. We're pretty confident. We've heard from Xbox insiders that Indiana Jones especially, and we've heard, Starfield and others are headed to PlayStation. And we know that Xbox paid for 3 months. IGN reported on this. According to internal documents, there is a 3-month exclusive on Stalker 2. So they for whatever reason thought this game is worthy of paying for exclusivity, and it's third party. Are they going to even want to do that going forward? Like, is Stalker 2 like the last game of an era? Like, is Xbox ever going to do that again and say, well, it makes sense for us to approach a game and pay them for third-party exclusivity? Because that was kind of my point to the guy that said there's no excuse. Yes, PlayStation published Stellar Blade. Yes, that they own the Helldivers 2 IP, but they went out and procured those relationships for exclusivity. I don't think Xbox is going to do that anymore. Stalker 2 might be one of the last third-party timed exclusives that they pay for because they just don't need to. That's not really in their purview, which is interesting because then that would mean, if Stalker 2 gets delayed by this company and starts to disrupt the calendar for Xbox, like if I'm Xbox, I'd be kind of annoyed by that. It's like, come on, guys, you gotta get out of the way for our, we don't want to be stepping on, as we said a little bit ago, stepping on each other's toes. So Stalker 2 could be one of the last third-party exclusives that Xbox writes a check for, as they can wield their own content, quite effectively in the future to make money, and they just don't need to spend it on third-party exclusives anymore.
Yeah, I can't see that being a part of their strategy going forward, especially when they have their own IP that they don't have to pay any extra money for, and they don't want to take that exclusive. So I can't imagine them going out and offering to pay money to a publisher or a developer to lock up exclusivity in the way that PlayStation does. Except, I will say, if they think they need to outbid PlayStation. Like, if it's basically like somebody's going to cough up a bunch of money for this particular title to get it only on their platform, I think they would go out and they would throw some money around just to make sure that a title that they really don't want to only be on PlayStation isn't only on PlayStation. And maybe the way to do that is to make it only on Xbox. That's really the only situation I can see. They might just buy the studio, honestly, before they did that. Supposedly that was a main factor with Bethesda, is that they heard Starfield, PlayStation was going to sign a deal. Mm-hmm. And so they were like, you know what, screw it. Bethesda would look great as part of Xbox. Let's go do it. Let's make it happen. Obviously, I'm sure there were many, many, many more considerations to be had in regard to that purchase. But that was a large factor that motivated that purchase, is what we've heard from testimony in the ABK trial. So I could totally see that. I could totally see like another Stellar Blade or something like that. That's probably a bad example because that doesn't really fit kind of the Xbox catalog type of. That's not like a textbook Xbox game or anything. But like, yeah, I could totally see a game like that, like Rise of the Ronin or something, where it'd probably be more high profile than those two games. But maybe like a Final Fantasy or something. Although Square is probably gonna go for a deal with PlayStation before they would with Xbox. But something where they don't want PlayStation to lock it up as only being exclusive on that console. I could see Xbox getting into a bidding war, and obviously they got more money than PlayStation does. So maybe they could win that, get that only on their console. That's the only situation, as like a counteractive measure, that I could see them doing that type of deal anymore.
Even then, the last couple of years, they haven't seemed interested in a bidding war. They've let a lot of third party go to PlayStation.
You're right.
And if they went the route like they did with Starfield, and they said, well, we're going to buy the studio so PlayStation can't lock up the game, they're showing now that if they do that, they wouldn't lock up the game to Xbox. They would just be the publisher. They would say, well, we want the game on our platform, but then they would end up saying, no, this game's going to be, multi-plat. So if they do take that strategy of saying, we don't want that locked up to PlayStation, it would be more along the lines of like, we're just going to add you to our library of games and then just publish it so that you can't keep us out in the cold. It'll be interesting to see where it all ends up. I wanted to do this show because it's like, I don't know. My spidey sense is tingling. I think we're on the cusp of another bunch of delay announcements not just with Xbox, but I think like Stalker 2 is kind of what made me think about it. It's like, oh, this really could disrupt some of Xbox's calendar. Maybe they'll bump something, but then there's a whole bunch of other games that might be saying the same thing. Like, oh man, fourth quarter's getting too full. Let's just bump to next year. So
speaking of the future months being full, like I'm super glad just personally for like what I'm going to be playing and maybe covering even that Stalker 2 has moved out of September. I mean, that makes things a lot easier for you as well, because like Astrobot September 6th, Stalker was going to come out on the 5th, so that's a day later, and then Space Marine 2 is the 9th. Those are two games that I know you're interested in playing, interested in covering and talking about. I mean, do you even give Stalker 2 any attention at that point? I mean, you can't really, I don't think. So that was a crowded period. Quidditch Champions coming out before that. That's something I at least want to take a peek at, see what that's all about. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. Like, I'm a big racing guy. I like the Forza Horizon games. I like the Crew Motorfest. That's still my best performing video on my channel. Inotria is a game we both alluded to before, with that being like a Souls-like. That's an up-and-coming, upstart, smaller developer that's looking to kind of replicate the Souls formula, do like a Lies of P type thing. We're both rooting for them in that regard. That's only a week after Space Marine 2 comes out. So
I think Space Marine 2 is another potential delay because they canceled their beta, so they're trying to optimize. That could be another company that says we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it, and they'll bump it.
I think that's a decent prediction. Yeah, I think that's a good shout, and I think that would maybe be good for them. Can you imagine if they had their own Helldivers moment in like January or February? That'd be great for that game. So, like, yeah, I mean, we were getting crap in chat, or I was getting crap in chat earlier for like, why are you saying delays are good? Like, sometimes they are good. Like, sometimes it just works for a game to come out when it comes out. Maybe Helldivers 2 was going to be a holiday game at some point. Not all these delays are announced, you know. Games have their own release calendar that internally shifts based on the way development is going. And that game landing in the first quarter of this year was fantastic for it. It really helped that game take off. Pow World released at a time when it just could take all the spotlight. So absolutely, when games release matters. And if any of these games get delayed from a period of time when they're not going to have as much impact and they're not as quality of an experience as to when they can have a bigger impact and they are a more feature complete quality experience, I'm all for that. And I hope any game that can benefit from that does that, because I think in general we want all games to succeed and thrive and be regarded as good.
Yeah, and that's why typically when I am saying, hey, just delay it, just push it, I'm basically saying it matters far more that the game hits and is at quality. Disappointing people now with a delay is something that can be endured. A game coming out when it's not ready, it can be absolutely destructive. Like you can become a byword. You know, Redfall has become a byword. Cyberpunk has become a byword. Like, a lot of these games had such bad launches, and they don't always get to have a comeback story, right? Redfall's not going to get to have a comeback story. Cyberpunk and No Man's Sky did. So you're choosing between two, and I'm like, hey, let's choose the thing that increases the odds of the game being well received. And as long as they can retain that 3-month exclusivity, that's also better for Xbox, consumers and Xbox Game Pass subscribers if Stalker 2 lands and is in a stronger position. So
I don't think either of us would mind if Space Marine 2 got delayed just because it's 3 days after Astrobot.
Well, I'm less concerned about it stepping on the toes of another game. I'm always going to say first and foremost, hey, I want the game to be good. Like, I keep going back to Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor irritates the fire out of me. The fact that it's in such a terrible state on PC, they got it playable on console, and it's like, that's great Star Wars, great video game, great storytelling, and it's been sullied by it wasn't ready. Space Marine 2 looks like an absolute blast, but please just don't release it if it's not ready. Like, come on.
What was the deal with that? I'm not privy to that, and maybe some of our audience isn't either. They had a beta that was scheduled that they canceled.
Yeah, they were going to do a beta, and it was for people. I think you could like pre-order to get access to the beta or something like that. And now they're going to give those people like a cosmetic or something as an apology. But they basically said, we want to make sure this game is optimized, so we're not going to do a beta. They want to focus all their efforts on the game. And this is a game that from the very beginning I have said, when I looked at gameplay of Space Marine 2, I'm like, I don't know if that game's going to perform all that well. It seems really ambitious. Graphical fidelity's high. There's so many enemies on screen, so much explosions and bombast and pieces and parts. And, people that were at a capture event 10 months ago said that performance was a little rough. So it's like, okay, they're now admitting that that's still true. If they're like, we're not going to do a beta, we want to optimize. So that's when I say, telling you, fourth quarter is the slippery. It's the most slippery quarter of the year because it's like, let's just bump to next year. And then first quarter becomes overstuffed because they want to get it in before the fiscal year ends.
Yeah.
So, that's what I think happens some of the times, which is why. That's why I think some people do say, well, they delay and they still come out and they're not ready. And it's like, yeah, no, that's fair. That does happen. And I think sometimes that's a fiscally driven thing, which sucks when it happens. But yeah.
No, to end on a high note, just remember, I almost forgot, we get a Zelda game in September.
A real
Zelda game this year in September.
It's the first real Zelda game.
An actual Zelda game, yeah.
To play as Zelda. My daughter cannot wait. She's so excited. She played every square inch of the Princess Peach game. So like nice. she's really, really excited that they're starting to make games where you get to play as the girl characters from the stories, and I think that's been fun to watch her. But then she's asked me every week about Astrobot. She's like, when's it coming out? I'm like, oh my word! It's like
that's
saw
true.
that Astrobot
both
commercial.
Those coming out the same month. Interesting. Yeah, the award season's shaping up for sure.
Yep. Thank you, Belphegor, for gifting a member, and Hyde for renewing. I went ahead and gave the 5 that I owe. We're going to head to Writer's Room, which is something that you have to be a member for, so consider becoming a member. If you got it gifted, you get to come with us. Guys, Kirk's name is clickable in the description. He's got reviews that he works on. The First Ascendant review did very well over there. He also streams on the Purple platform under Kirk the Gamer, so you can check him out there. He's with all the games coming up recently, I'm sure he's going to have some that he wants to review. Anything you set your sights on in the near future?
No, not near future. Yeah, I mean, I dropped the ball on that Marvel Rivals, but that's not coming out until next year, purportedly. I mean, I was planning on doing a Concord review. I guess I still will, but I don't know if anybody will watch it. I think everybody's already kind of made up their mind about that. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in Concord, so that review probably should happen. And maybe end up doing something for Inotria as well. I'm waiting to hear back from that publisher to see if they'll give me any type of access or whatever. I think I got approved for like preliminary access, but I haven't like been given the game, But yeah, that was one that both of us were looking to cover. So for Souls fans out there, hoping to get in on that one and give some early impressions.
Great. Well, be sure to check that out, guys. We're going to go ahead and head to Writer's Room. There's a link in chat if you want to come with us. This is how we end the day and how we plan the next day's shows. Thanks so much for being a member. You may have gotten gifted a member last week or today. A huge week last week with another week starting out similarly, a little slow, but you guys can still hit the goal for the week of 500 members, and we'll play a community game night. That was the feedback we received. We've done some town hall meetings with the members, and the feedback was we'd rather do community game nights instead of watch Lono play a scary game or a salty game. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream where Kirk and I talked about delays. Are we going to get more delays coming fourth quarter? Make sure and change